Are you ready for Contenders and Pretenders?
Yes. How many fan bases can we anger right now? Let's do
it. We'll try not to anger too many of them. Basically, here's how I tried to, this is the idea I kind of have. So I'm going to go through every team that is in a playoff position right now. So teams that are in the top 3 in each of their respective divisions and the 2 wildcard teams in each conference. And you're essentially just going to tell me if they look like a team that could be a contender. So that doesn't necessarily mean outright Stanley Cup winner, just a team that can actually hold on to where they're at in the playoffs, in the playoff picture, and actually maybe even go far in the playoffs. And you can tell me if a team is a pretender, where maybe they are probably just a team that's going to go out in the first round, or a team that might not even hold on to their spot at all. They just look like fakers. So you can give me answers for each of the teams I bring up. How does that sound?
I love it. Let's get at it.
Let's do it. Let's start in the Metro Division. The Carolina Hurricanes atop that division, one of the best teams in the National Hockey League. Contender or pretender?
Stone cold contender. I think one of the better teams in the league. I've heard from multiple people that work for different teams have mentioned that Carolina is the best team their coaching staff have felt they've faced this season. Obviously strung together a lot of wins early in the year. I think the fact that they have a group that's played some playoff rounds the last few seasons will help them. And so for me, they're a legitimate team that I could see lifting the cup come July.
Okay. What about the team in second place behind them in the division? The Washington Capitals, contender or pretender?
For me, they're a pretender. I just think that time has passed them by a little bit. That's not to say I think that they're a poor team or anything like that. Wouldn't surprise me in the least to see them make the playoffs. They always seem to. But, I just don't see them as the threat they were, for a good decade there to win a Stanley Cup. And so, if they were the ones to go on and win, I'd be very, very surprised. And that's why I'm labeling them a pretender.
What about the New York Rangers, third place in the Metropolitan Division?
Pretender. I don't think they're ready yet. They've got some nice young players there. Adam Fox is having a great year after winning the Norris Trophy again. I love Igor Shesterkin, their goaltender. You start to see the pieces of a team that can be competitive. Obviously, Artemi Panarin, Mika Zibanejad. They've got good players. But I just don't see them as a team that's winning 4 playoff rounds. They gotta walk before they can run, I suppose. And I see them more walking right now rather than being a team that's sprinting through 4 playoff rounds.
Don't mind me. I'm going to start to write some of these down. I'm going to move over to the Atlantic Division. We're going to start off with the team atop that division and atop the National Hockey League in the Florida Panthers. Contender or pretender?
Contender. They gave Tampa a real run last year. In the playoffs, they've started this season great. Their underlying metrics are really strong. They control the puck. They're getting good goaltending from 2 goaltenders. That's one thing that's hurt them a little bit is Bobrovsky hasn't maybe been in the first couple seasons exactly what they expected, but I think that's righted itself. I just see them being a deep team. I'm not putting them at if we were subdividing these contenders into into tiers, I probably have them in the second tier of contenders. I'm not saying they're one of the 4 favorite teams to win the cup, but they definitely can think that way, dream that way. To me, if everything goes their way, I could see them going on that kind of run.
Not too far behind them, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Are they contenders or are they pretenders?
Controversial pick, but I'm going with contender. And, being in the playoffs the last 5 years, obviously haven't won a playoff round. That criticism or that observation or that fact is totally valid. But, I just think we've seen a lot of teams that eventually do break through and get something together. And I would, again, have the Leafs in the second tier of the contenders list. But I could see things going their way. If you look at they're right at the top of the league in expected goals, Corsi, they have dangerous shooters. Jack Campbell's been awesome to start this year, and their specialty teams have been good on both sides of it. So, I think that they have the sort of recipe there where I could see it coming together for them. But, they've got to get the giant monster out of the closet first. And that's, themselves, the demons under their beds, under their cars. Paul McLean had a famous line in that Amazon series that went last year. They've got to get past themselves and then get past 4 teams, but I could see them doing it.
You didn't swear as like what you did last time you said that quote.
I'm trying to keep this as a family show, even though we already did marry, fuck, kill. So
try to make it marry, hook up, kill. Yes. How about the Tampa Bay Lightning?
Oh, contender. They're a team. I don't care what we see from them in the regular season. I'm going to have them in a contender spot until proven otherwise. I mean, to have won the Stanley Cup in back-to-back years, obviously they've lost their entire third line from those two cup-winning teams. They've lost Nikita Kucherov for an extended period of an injury. Now they've lost Braden Point, and they're still winning games this week. Like, I think that they just have an understanding of knowing what it takes. They have probably the best goaltender in the world in Andrei Vasilevsky, and they got a bunch of gamers, as John Cooper likes to call his players. So, I don't think it matters for them where they finish as long as they get into a playoff series come round one, and they're an absolute top level contender as hard as it is to win 3 in a row. I'm not betting against them.
The two wildcard teams. Let's start with the Columbus Blue Jackets.
They're a pretender, but they're one of the early season surprises in a good way in the league. Like last year was a total loss season for Columbus. They ended up trading Seth Jones, making some other big moves. They did Dubois for Line trade midway through last year, but remember, this was a team that under John Tortorella was always difficult to play against. They beat the Leafs in 2020 in the bubble. They won a playoff series a year before that, before coming up against Boston. And so, they've been a good organization. I think they took a small step back last year, but they're producing offense now. And I think that's maybe the most surprising thing, because they don't really have a superstar player, especially with Line out injured right now as we're recording this. Mm-hmm. So, I think that they punch above their weight class. Kudos to them, but I'm not saying they can win the Stanley Cup just yet.
And the Pittsburgh Penguins.
Pretender. As much as I want to get wrapped up in the storylines, they remind me a bit of Washington, right? Like, these were two great franchises for a long time. There's a reason why they're still hanging on to that greatness. They have some great players. I think, they did build a certain culture there where they're able to have some of lesser names come in and play a way that brings success. But, ultimately, I don't see them being teams that could knock off, the top tier contenders, in a playoff series.
By the way, just after the Pittsburgh Penguins, there are 4 teams that are within no more than 2 points behind the Pittsburgh Penguins and Columbus Blue Jackets, tied for those 2 wildcard spots. The Red Wings, the Bruins, the Devils, and the Flyers, all within no more than 2 points of the 2 wildcard spots. So even if they're not in those positions of wildcard spots, I'd argue that being within 2 points is still pretty good for their chances.
Yeah, I think they're all pretenders, though. And probably the most surprising one out of that list, of course, is Boston, because they've played a Stanley Cup final in 2019, Game 7. They've had a ton of success under Bruce Cassidy. But it just seems like something's a little off there. I mean, in fairness to them, they've had a weird start to the year where they at one point have played the fewest games through, a month of the season or what have you. They're a team that relies on 2 goaltenders. That weren't able to get 2 goaltenders going that way. Like, I think that there's some mitigating factors where they're going to perform better. And I certainly see them making the playoffs still this season after a bit of a slow start. But, I don't, they're a hard one to sort of bet against or to say they can't win, because I do think they just have, they have that je ne sais quoi, Julian, of knowing how to play and how to perform in a playoff series, how to tilt the odds slightly in their favor by not making mistakes, not beating themselves, those type of things. But, it would be a great way for Patrice Bergeron and what could be his last season. It's kind of gone under the radar, but he's an unrestricted free agent, and I'm not sure that he'll be back. It's not that he can't be back, but, maybe depending what he sees from his team and whether he thinks they have a chance to win could dictate that. But, as of right now, I got them in the pretender category. And that maybe the biggest surprise of them all we didn't get to is the New York Islanders are at the bottom of the Metropolitan Division. So we're not even debating whether they're contenders or pretenders, and they were in back-to-back Eastern Conference finals.
That is really nuts. Let's go over to the Western Conference. The team atop the Central Division, the Minnesota Wild, contender or pretender?
Ooh. I'm giving them a bottom level contender. And,
okay.
Look, the Wild don't get a ton of national love, but they've slowly been building something. Like, they were really good last year. Now it's limited. You're only playing your same division. That was all the talk about, Kirill Kaprizov's contract. You're paying this guy what? He's only played X amount of games all against 7 teams. But, you can tell I don't believe it with my heart that they're a contender, but I do think that they're a team on the rise. I think that they're a team that could surprise. I could see them winning playoff round or rounds plural. And so I'm going to give them like small C contender status, but not with a ton of conviction.
Okay. What about the St. Louis Blues?
They're a contender for me. They're one of those teams that aren't going to wow you. Like, I don't think they're going to push for the President's Trophy here. But they know how to get it done. And they're just kind of a veteran group that I don't think any team would really want to face in a best of 7. Again, it doesn't matter if they end up starting round 1 on the road. It doesn't matter that the team they might be playing had 110 points or whatever it is in the season. Like, I think when you sort of take away what the regular season results were, and you're going up against Ryan O'Reilly and the blue line the Blues have, even Jordan Binnington, right? I mean, Jordan Binnington has had some ups and downs, but when he gets hot, as he did during the year they won the Stanley Cup in 2019, like that's a tough guy to go through. And so, they won't be favored anywhere, but if everything lines up for them, if they stay healthy, I could see them going on another long playoff run. I'm not giving them the P status. I'm putting the C on the Blues.
Okay. And what about the Winnipeg Jets?
Contender. The Jets, the one thing that I've noticed about the Jets is, they relied so heavily on Connor Hellebuck in the past. And, they were really, frankly, a poor defensive team last year. Now, they're not the best defensive team in the league by any stretch now, but they've made noticeable improvements in their metrics, like expected goals, shot attempts against. Like, they're controlling the puck more. I think they're relying a little bit less on Hellebuck, and the beauty is they still have Hellebuck, and they have a group of forwards that can get the job done. And so, I see that Central Division as being a little bit open. It's not because there's bad teams. There's a bunch of good teams. Maybe, we'll see what Colorado has in store for us. Maybe not a great team. I mean, Colorado's had a lot of things that have gone, I guess, wrong or been challenges for them in the first quarter of the season. But I could see a team like Winnipeg coming out of that. I mean, again, a lot has to go right, but I'm putting the contender status on them.
We'll get to Colorado in a moment, but because I'm going to try to do top 3 in each division and then get to the wildcard teams. We'll go to the Pacific first. We'll start off with the team that is atop that division, the Calgary Flames.
Contender. And, the reason I say that is because, to me, this is a team built for playoff success. Like, they check hard. They control the puck. They keep you out of their end. They got, big defensemen, but they have guys that mobile back there, can move it up. And they got enough players to get the scoring done. Like, it's not always going to be pretty. They're going to grind out 2-1 and 3-1 or 3-2 type of games. But generally, that's how the playoffs go, right? And so I think there's actually a great debate to be had between Calgary and Edmonton. Like, which team would you truly rather have, if your life depended on it, and only, you can only pick one of those teams, they have to win the Stanley Cup to save your life. Like, who would you pick? Like, as much as Edmonton offers us this beautiful 2-headed superstar scoring monster in McDavid and Draisaitl, they do get a lot of, it's not a criticism, but it's just fact that they get a lot of their work done on the power play. And as we saw last year in a playoff series, Connor McDavid won an entire playoff series without having a penalty called against him. And so, the power plays do tend to go away. It's a little less sustainable in the playoffs. I don't like Edmonton's team top to bottom as much as I like Calgary's. I like the top a lot. I can't poke one hole in the top, and those top guys might just go bananas one spring and almost do it themselves. But, I think Calgary, they got some secret sauce there. Like, they're playing the right way, and they're hard to play against no matter which of their 4 lines you're out there for. Jacob Markstrom has been great in their goal. And so I just don't see a lot of holes in the Flames. Yeah, they don't have the high end offensive game breakers, but I think you can win a cup without that. I mean, we've seen St. Louis do it, for example. Even Boston, a team that's been really competitive for a long time. I mean, Brad Marchand is probably a high-end game breaker offensively, but, really they're not doing it with 100-point players. They have a certain way of playing, and they have, a way of winning games. And I think Calgary's really hit on something this year. I'm
with you with the Calgary Flames, man. And in the Battle of Alberta playoff series, like, as fun as the Oilers can look and as talented as they are, I've seen this so many times before where a team that looks like the Calgary Flames. I mean, Daryl Sutter's been through it with the LA Kings. Those grinding, wearing out teams were able to check and able to defend. They're the ones who end up as the last team standing when it's all said and done. And in a series against the Edmonton Oilers, not to shift on the Oilers here, because they do have secondary scoring options. And I think they'd be able to kind of hold their own a bit too. It could go 7 games, but I think the Flames might actually have that edge. So I'm with you on the Calgary Flames here, as much as I hate to admit it, because I would love to see the Edmonton Oilers one up the Calgary Flames and actually make that run. And speaking of which, I guess to that point, what do you think about the Edmonton Oilers?
I'm calling them a pretender, but
wow,
I got to be clear about this, because this isn't this isn't a John Tortorella-esque rant or anything. I just have serious questions about their blue line. I have serious questions about their goaltending. I know a quarter of the way into the season, both have held up well enough for them to have lots of points in the bank. I just don't know if McDavid and Draisaitl can outscore the team's problems come a playoff series. Now, that being said, I do think Ken Holland will be extremely active before the trade deadline, March 21st. I think that there are some moves he can make to address those concerns. And as I previously mentioned, maybe those two guys can win a cup on their own. But until I see a little bit more, I'm not calling them a contender. I just don't know that they're built to go on a 4-round playoff run right now.
Wow. Okay. I think that might be our first surprise of this exercise.
There's been a couple. I mean, it's just that's a Canadian fan base, so someone's going to not like it. But I mean, it's just the truth. I haven't seen it yet. I want to believe it. I really actually do. Honestly,
me too.
I want superstar players to be playing those games, right? Like if we're talking about selling the game and all that, like having Connor McDavid or Draisaitl score one of those goals in a cup final or a third round, that's where the legend stuff gets made. But I have some concerns about their tendency to get trapped in their own zone and what might happen with their goaltending that could derail them on the way to that kind of greatness.
What about the Vegas Golden Knights?
Pretender this season. They just have too much going against them. I know we could dream up or cook up the scenario where Jack Eichel comes back and he's a world beater and, they get healthy and everyone's back in the lineup. It's probably not fair. Like, let me amend that. Small C contender. They've won so many playoff series, Julian. When I don't feel like this is their year. Like, I feel like a lot has gone against them, but then I could see them pushing through that, being stronger for it. And then they already have this like great foundation of experience and I think understanding of what they need to do. And certainly if, what's hurt them in the playoffs the last couple of years, like in the Edmonton bubble and even last year, is they just didn't score enough when it mattered. And, I think that is somewhat rectified by the moves they made with their team. And so I'm going to give them the small C contender rather than the pretender.
So we go to the wildcard teams, and I realize there are 3 teams tied for that second wildcard. So I guess we'll go through each of them, but we'll go to the one that has 2 points more than those 3 teams, and that's the Anaheim Ducks.
Pretender, team on the rise. Great young players. I know we've talked about Troy Terry, Trevor Zegras, Jamie Drysdale on their blue line. Like I like where they're headed. I think that they've been one of the good, pleasant surprises of the early part of the season, but they're not scaring you in a playoff series just yet.
How about the Colorado Avalanche, a team that has 3 games in hand on the 2 other teams they're tied with for that second wildcard spot?
They're 100% a contender. They were the Stanley Cup favorite entering the season, I think, in most books. I know it hasn't gone well. They dealt with a COVID issue. They've had McKinnon out. They've missed players, significant players to injury, and they're still pretty darn good. And like when they're at their best, they're really good. Cale Makar, just an absolute stud. Like, I think his coming out party, so to speak. I mean, people know his name, but when they get to watch him play in Beijing for Team Canada, I think it's going to be a big moment for him. Nazem Kadri's having a great year in a contract year. McKinnon will be there when it matters. I think that this is still, there's no perfect teams in the league anymore, but this is the probably scariest team when fully healthy on paper in the league for me. So, and again, they've played playoff series. I think the hunger is there. Like, there's legendary stories about Nathan McKinnon's summer, like his workouts, just like how driven this guy is. I feel like it's their time, even though it's been a strange start to the year and they're kind of in the middle of the pack versus where we expect them to be.
How many of those stories with Nathan McKinnon involve them eating an In-N-Out burger?
Not very many. He spends a chunk of his summer in Toronto. So I've heard about like these 6 days a week crazy workouts he's doing. And I mean, this guy's fanatical. Like that's what it takes to be at the top of your profession, right? That's what it takes to be at the top of this profession, where it's all highly motivated individuals with good genes and all those types of things. I mean, he's looking for that extra 1%. And I just think, again, not the ideal start from a personal standpoint for him, the way this year's gone, but I think he'll be there when it matters.
The San Jose Sharks.
They're a pretender. Much like Anaheim, I think good for them for the starts of the year they've had. They've reversed some troubling, trends the last couple of years. They're introducing young players to their lineup and still having success. They're doing a good job of keeping the puck out of the net. James Reimer's been a nice addition there. They've switched up their goaltending, which I think has helped. And I can see a path to where they get back to being a good team. I don't think they're a great team at this stage. And so they get the big P on that one. And
the last one, the Nashville Predators.
Pretender. I want to believe in Nashville. I love going to Nashville. It's really one of the fun hockey markets in the league. And they've had a sustained run of success. They turned some things over. I mean, Matt Duchene's having, for me, my biggest surprise of the quarter season, or the biggest turnaround, is Matt Duchene, who's, scoring at a point a game after, the first 2 years in Nashville since he's getting his big contract was basically half a point a game. There's good things happening for the Predators, but I don't think there's enough great things to say that they're going to threaten a Colorado or a Vegas or one of those teams that, I could legitimately see winning the cup out of the West.